clubs. Last month, I was at the Hamilton Club, and the presenter was Steve Mercer, the person you're going to witness tonight. Steve served in the Army for 20 years. It's the first time I meet someone that retires at 40. So anyways, Steve is accompanied by his lovely wife, Sandra. Sandra, hello. Welcome, Sandra. I found Steve's presentation extremely motivating, and I discussed it with Harvey and the guys, and they said, we got to bring him in, and here he is, Steve Mercer. There he is.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is Steve Mercer. I'm a retired Master Corporal. I spent 20 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. I served my entire career with the Royal Canadian Dragoons, which is Canada's senior Reg Force Artillery Regiment, founded in 1883. So we've been around for a little while. And tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my experiences in the Army, more of the, I like to think of it as the ones that are fit for public consumption for the most part. There are some stories I'm still sworn to secrecy. I'm not allowed to tell. It might, some people might still get in trouble for it. So where did this all start for me? Well, the beginning was I grew up in Markham, so we're on Toronto right there, and I ended up flying to Halifax. Landed in Halifax, and had to go all the way over here to just up by Digby, Nova Scotia. One of the armpits of the world, honestly. But that's where a great place to put a basic training base. And I arrived at Canadian Forces Recruit School, Cornwallis, which unfortunately is no longer in existence. The buildings are all still there, but they're using it for something else now. But when you walk through this front gate, and especially when you do it, that front gate there, especially when you do it at about 1:30 in the morning, and you've been drinking since about 2 in the afternoon, and it's been a 3-hour bus ride, and you walk through there and across, you don't see, because we're working on them, but across the entire length of that, lit up, it's in 10 feet high letters, it says "Learn to Serve." And I walked through that gate and I went, holy crap, I'm in the Army, what the hell did I do? And they were nice, they didn't quite get right on the garbage can lids immediately. That was saved for 4 in the morning when it was time to get up. So about 3 hours from the time I walked through the door. And we go through all that through basic training there. After spending about 3 months in Cornwallis, I graduated basic training, and I was lucky, one of the few lucky ones. I got actually to go home for Christmas and then come back to pick up my second phase of the training after, which was done in just outside of Armuckto, between Armuckto and Fredericton, New Brunswick, at lovely Canadian Forces base Gagetown. Largest training base in the Commonwealth. Their training area in the back there. One of the few places we can actually fire live with live ammunition, war shots at that. Because of Petawall, we couldn't do it. But we ended up in Gagetown. There's the front door to the front gate to the base there. Then I went to join the Combat Training Center to begin my life learning how to be a tanker, or at least an armored soldier, because inside the armored regiment there's either reconnaissance, or recce as we refer to it, and then there's the saber squadrons or the tank squadrons, depending on what we happen to have. So, in Gagetown, it wasn't just generalized sort of stuff that we were learning, because in basic training it's very much, here's your rifle, this is how you clean it, this is what you do, this is how you do this, that, the other thing. This is where we actually start training so we can have something to do in case we ever had to go to war. And the first thing they trained us on was the old Chevy 5/4 ton truck. All right, we didn't even have a trailer with ours, thank God, because they're a pain in the butt. But we ended up having to learn how to drive this so that everybody at least had some sort of common function. All right, when you showed up to your regiment, the very least you could do, be a truck driver. All right, to get storage equipment around. The next thing was the radio. And this is the old 77 set man pack, vintage Vietnam. Canada's probably, I think we just got rid of these maybe 10 years ago. They are so simple that a trained monkey can operate them, which was good because some of us were trained monkeys. I do remember this specifically though, because it actually led to one of the funniest things happening in my entire Army career, and it happened, I'm now, I don't know, maybe 5 months into training. And as we're learning to operate these things, and it's not just set them up, but we have to learn voice procedure, how to talk on the radio. So we're not giving away anything, it's done in slightly coded, kind of sleight of hand use of language, this sort of stuff, very just generalized terms. For instance, if you want to know what's going on with somebody, you ask for a SITREP, which is situation report. All these other little things. So what they did for our final exercise on this is they had us, every one of us, and there's 22 in our course at this point, every one of us puts one of these radios on our back and we go walking down the railway tracks, the old abandoned ones. And about every 50 meters, the NCO at the front just point one side, and the guy at the very end of the line, off the side of the track, down the berm, set up your radio. So all said and done, we were spread out over, I saw a solid 2 kilometers. And a good friend of mine, his name is Brian Cody, he was up at the very front because they were doing alphabetically, and me being Mercer, I was kind of right in the middle. So I'm sitting there, and we all have a piece of paper with a script that we have to read. So we all can learn to recognize what's going on the radio and what we're talking about and all this sort of stuff. And it's very set, and we learn such very appropriate things as there's no such term as over and out. You're either over or you're out. Over means I want the conversation to continue. Out means I'm putting a stop to it right now. You don't need to know anything more. So, we got all this sort of stuff, and this has been drilled into us now for about a week. Everybody gets set up and they start going through it, and we're on the 3rd serial of this, which was taking us about 15 minutes to get to. And it's Cody's turn to talk on the radio. And he comes up, and all he had to say was something along the lines of, I've spotted an enemy advance, I need reinforcements. Or something along those lines, I don't remember exactly. But he comes over the radio, I need backup, send it now, over and out. And we all kind of sat there and went, this is not going to go well. And sure enough, over the radio, "Cody, what are you doing?" And he yells at Cody over the radio, "Do it again and do it right." So he tries it again, and 3 more times he gets it wrong. Finally, you just get a, "Cody, get in here!" And about 10 minutes later, I see him running down. He packed up his radio, and he's running down the railway tracks. And he's got about 2 kilometers to go to get on the base where the command post is set up, and all the radios there. And they got him all the way into base, and then they made him go and set up his radio right outside the command post, and they yelled at him over his radio for 10 minutes. And then they make him pack it all up again and run all the way back out to his spot. And set it up again, and he screwed it up again. At which point they said, "That's it, everybody pack up, come on in." We all kind of went, "That was pretty easy, I didn't talk on the radio at all." And at the time, I thought that was great, because I was not a fan of, I never really considered myself to be all that technologically advanced, as my wife would attune to or attest to at the back there. But, so setting up the radio was a little bit technical for me. I could do it, but I didn't like it. So it wasn't something I ever wanted to have to do later on. And wow, did I ever apparently pick the wrong trade to get into if I don't want to talk on the radio, because after I left the Gagetown there, everywhere I went, I think with the exception of the first year I was a driver, every other position I was in, I had to talk on the radio for 20 years. So he got pretty good at it later. So that was the next thing we had to learn. Beyond that, the Colt, this is a Colt 30 caliber. It's been rebored out to, or was rebored out to 7.62 millimeter NATO standard. We had ones in our regiment that were manufactured in 1918. We were using them actively until the mid-90s.
Yeah.
All right, and they were a pain in the butt. Nobody liked them. Stoppage drills on most machine guns were usually recock it and see if it'll fire, and if that doesn't work, then you got to go a bunch of other stuff. But this one routinely was you kept a brass hammer right beside you, and whenever it did stop, you just beat it on the side with the hammer a few times, recocked it, and see if it would fire. And it usually would. So, yeah, they were not a bad piece. It was my first kind of venture into playing with actual fully automatic weapons. It was interesting to do with, and we use this style of machine gun. Not just on a tripod like it is there, but we would use them on bipods at sentry positions. We use them for anti-aircraft on the tanks. We use them for coaxial machine guns, which are slaved to the main gun of the tank. So all sorts of stuff. We had to learn these. Grenades, the M67 spherical hand grenade, again NATO standard. Lots of fun. It's about the size of a hard ball. It weighs about a pound, so a little bit more than a hard ball. They're actually surprisingly difficult to throw a good distance. Honestly, with any accuracy, if you can get that far corner in the room from where I'm standing, you're doing pretty good. All right, they are what they refer to as an area weapon, meaning that anybody who's in a certain area is going to be hurt. Usually it's within about 5 meters, it's guaranteed kill zone. Within 10 meters, it's an injury zone. But the one thing that I'll always point out, and it drives anybody who's ever watched a war movie with me, drives them nuts, is I'll sit there and look at stuff like this and I'll go, a grenade does not go boom and an entire building comes down and stuff like that, or a Jeep goes flying off into the air like the A-Team and MacGyver and stuff. Where for some of us who are, I'm dating myself for the younger guys here, but all those movies where you see somebody toss a grenade and boom, the building. Yeah, no, it's a very muted sound. It sounds like whoop, and maybe a little bit of a in the middle. And it leaves a puff of black smoke about this big around, maybe about 1.5 feet tall, and that's it. All right, so when you ever see movies and there are grenades in movies and they throw them in, yeah, you can look at them and go, oh, that's horseshit. Pardon my French, by the way. And lastly here was the M72 short-range anti-armor weapon, or the SHRA, as we refer to it as. Great little piece of kit, a lot of fun. Anybody in this room could fire one. And it's not that they're simple to fire, it's that on the side, you don't see on that one, but it's on the left-hand side of the weapons tube. There's complete instructions on how to open it up, how to arm it, how to aim it, how to fire it. It's all written out right there for you. So, if you're, in the mood sort of deal. But anyways, we did learn these sort of stuff. And these all became the tools of our trades. All right, so I talk to people, especially with you, and I won't like get into the handgun side of it here, but some people wait into these handgun things, and I'm like, you know what? This is a tool. It's no different than this computer. It's no different than a pen. It's all in what it's being used for. And these became the tools of our trade. All right, everybody had to know how to use this stuff because there possibly could come a time when we would need to use it. So after that was all done, we had to move on to PFC training, which stands for Primary Combat Function Training. And for me, I was going to be a driver of a Cougar armored vehicle, or an AVGP, armored vehicle fight, AVGP, armored vehicle general purpose. There was 3 versions of this in the Canadian Armed Forces. This was the Cougar, which had a Scorpion turret on the top from a British Scorpion tank. There was the Grizzly, which I have pictures of a little bit later, which had a 50 caliber Cadillac gauge turret on it, a little smaller. And then there was the Husky, which is the recovery vehicle, which had none of that stuff across it, just had a great big box across the top with a crane sticking off the back of it. So we learned to drive these in all different conditions. We learned how to drive them down highways, because we racked up about 700 kilometers each as drivers, just driving them down the highways in New Brunswick. We learned the cross-country stuff. Some of it was serious, some of it was a little bit more fun. I can honestly say I never got my Cougar wings, as we call it. I did get my light track wings later on, but I never jumped one. And God, do I ever feel for the crew inside that. They're going to feel like dice in a Yahtzee cup. So, crew comfort was actually something we talked about a lot, because you had to be able to drive these things in such a manner that when you got to wherever it was you're going, the guys on the top could still do their jobs, all right, do them effectively. So after that, I moved off to Petawawa. So I joined the Royal Canadian Dragoons, and I was sent to CFP Petawawa, which is, you can see Ottawa down there, that's where we landed, and Petawawa is just outside of Pembroke. There's our front gate. I was actually up there 2-3 weeks ago for a reunion, a lot of fun. A lot of things hadn't changed, like the front gate. A lot of things had changed, which was both good and bad at the same time. For me, anyways, personally. So once I got to Petawawa, what do we have to do? Well, we got assigned to a troop. And the way it worked was we have a regiment, which has 5 squadrons inside it. Each squadron, you have a headquarters squadron, that takes one of them. You have a recce squadron, that's your second one. And then you have 3 saber squadrons. So 3 other tanks, armored cars, whatever it happens to be. Inside those squadrons, you have 6 troops. You have a squadron headquarters, which is where all the officers run and they run the show. You have an administrative troop or admin troop, and then you've got 4 fighting troops. So actually 7 troops, because there's a maintenance troop in there, I forgot. So that's how this all breaks down. And then inside a troop, you have 4 call signs or 4 vehicles. CS usually stands for call sign. So once we get to all this part, and we're now actually part of the regiment, what do we do? Yeah, worked on our vehicles whenever they needed work, didn't matter. You had something to do. And now I wouldn't necessarily be the one who was doing an engine pack pull, but I would be the guy who would be helping the mechanic take all the deck plates off. I'd be crawling underneath the engine and loosening engine mounts, stuff like that to make their jobs easier. All right, so Canadian crews, as opposed to, say, American crews, are very well maintenance trained. All right, because we have to be. We don't have enough, maintenance guys running around to do stuff like that. When I did training in the States, at one point we broke a tank. They brought another tank out. We swapped the crew from our Canadian crew got into the other tank. The American crew got into theirs, and we said, well, what are you doing? Well, we're waiting for maintenance to come out now and fix it. We're like, well, don't you know how to do anything? No, I know how to drive it. And that's about it. Well, I know how to gun it, but whatever. So the Canadian crews were a little bit better when it came to that, so actually quite a bit better. We do also various training, whether it be just weapons, we do weapons drill, we do periodic, once a week, we do stables, which would be working on vehicles, weapons, that sort of stuff, cleaning them. We didn't typically work on them if they were broken, because you're getting into some pretty advanced stuff for gun mechanics. So we would just let them take care of that stuff, but we'd be doing the cleaning. We do in classes like armored fighting vehicle recognition, which later on in my career would be like taking models like you guys build here, sticking them, kind of behind sand berms and stuff like that, and then looking at them from binoculars, sure about here to that far window away, and they actually look lifelike. And it was a very good method of training that we developed. So that was, that'd be some of the classes we take. Parades, yep, we did parades usually at least twice a year. More often than that, it was usually 4 or 5 times a year. It'd be for regimental birthday stuff or Christmas, or every now and then. One year we got Freedom of the City of Pembroke. That was a big parade. And that's the ones that you see, you picture when troops are just standing there doing nothing. Well, you don't think they're doing anything, but trust me, the guys who are standing there at attention, they're putting forth a huge amount of effort through their body to keep as still as possible. And you have to learn to ignore stuff. If it's in the summertime, you get the little bead of sweat that comes down your nose and then into your eye. And you can't do anything. No, you just stand there, and it hurts. And that's part of the discipline that they want in you, so you can deal with that sort of stuff. But we also did parades on average 3 times a day. The parades were just generally a formation to make sure you knew everybody who was there, or if somebody wasn't there, you knew where they were, sort of deal, and that sort of stuff. So we'd get there, we'd have a PT parade, we'd have a squadron sergeant major's parade, and then we'd usually have a troop horns parade after lunch. Just again, make sure we knew where everybody was, positive control. And like I said, cleaning everything. Yeah, we used to laugh that they should have just named our trade broom technician. Because we swept the floors at least twice a day, seemed to be anyways. And Fridays, it was a sweep it twice, hose it on down, and then squeegee it dry, and then it gets inspected. And oh, what a pain in the butt. But at least you knew on a Friday afternoon that when you made it to the time of squeegeeing, you're this close to being able to, get away for the weekend if you were so lucky enough. But that's the sort of stuff we did a lot of. When we went to the field, we got a general map of Ontario here, and we were started off in Petawawa, which is up somewhere about here. And we spent a lot of time in the Petawawa training area, which is this big area here. In the Petawawa training area, it's not that big, but whenever we were firing live ammunition for the tanks, we had to send out guys out as far as Algonquin Park. And the reason we could never fire a war shot in Petawawa is because if the round ricocheted, it would travel approximately 140 more kilometers before it hit the ground. And it's traveling at supersonic speeds. So, yeah. So we're not, if we wanted to do that, we'd actually literally have to close down Algonquin Park. So nobody allowed in it, because if free cases in the template. So we did a lot of practice stuff, which is still pretty good. It simulates everything. It's just if the round hits and ricochets, just after, I think it's after about 5 kilometers, it starts to tumble end over end. So it slows down a lot quicker. It typically only will go about 60 kilometers before it hits the ground again. So only 60, I know. So that would be one place we did our training. We did a lot of training way over here, this little nub in Georgian Bay. That is Meaford training area. There are still tank ruts there from the mid 40s when they were doing training and getting ready to go for World War II. That's how deep the ruts get in there. And the funny thing is, if it's not ruts, it's shale. The whole thing is shale. So try to dig a trench in shale. No, it's not going to happen. The first time I went out, I did in both my rotator cuffs the first week I was ever there. Oh God, that hurt. Yep, no more digging for you. Yay! So in that case, you build up. Yeah, they say after a while, they said too many guys were getting injured. They actually said, all right, we're just going to take logs. We're going to build them up where your slit trench would be. Okay, thanks. And occasionally also we would get lucky enough, we go down to Fort Drum, New York, down in this area here. Fort Drum, New York is roughly about double the size of Petawawa in terms of its training area. They have an air base there. It was quite entertaining every now and then to watch the A-10s go in and do live runs every now and then, because as they're making their approach, and it's deadly silent because they've got the engines throttled back as they're coasting in. And all of a sudden you just hear a and about 2 or 3 seconds later, you have an area like 3 times the size of this classroom just disappear in smoke as their 100 rounds of 30 millimeter hit the ground. So it's quite impressive. We did a lot of cross training too. So the first year I was there, I didn't just practice driving our own cars. I actually got thrown on my light track course. So driving an M113. This is not the exact one I drove, but it is. I did end up driving the Medics one for the next year. This is the vehicle I got my track wings on, because I went into in Meaford, went into a ditch, which was actually a sunken road, and it was just the road's exact width that the tracks were long. So I went in, dropped down, hit the lip on the far side, and boom, catapulted myself out the far side at about 60 kilometers an hour. I saw it coming. At the last second, I saw it coming. I thought it was just a bush. But no, there was actually a road there. And the last second, I had just enough time to lift my chin up and lean forward really hard against the front of the driver's cupola so that I took all the impact on my chest when we came down. My crew commander in the back wasn't so lucky. He didn't see it. And apparently, I found out later, he was catapulted out of the vehicle. The only thing that was in there would have been his feet. And we were just in this little spot in the commander's cupola, and he hooked his toes on the front. And then when I landed, he came back down, he ripped all the stretchers out of the ceiling. We had a case of Coke in the back, it freaking blew up everywhere. It was all a mess. And I'm like, I turn around, I'm like, yeah, let's do that again. He's like, no. What do you mean no? That was fun. Yeah, for you, he said. So anyway, but I learned an awful lot about these, and I actually, it was kind of where I started falling in love with actually tracked vehicles. They're a lot more fun than the wheeled ones. I did learn a few others in there, but this one actually shows up in the kind of the opening slides there. This is my my troop. We were down in, well, not my troop, the troop I was part of. We were down in Fort Riley, Kansas, doing some cross training with the first to the fourth, or the quarter cav. And we're all, I think the oldest guy there is this guy, and he's 25. So the rest of us are all, I was about 21, and I was standing in the top middle there. We're all trying to look really tough. Gun roll and stuff, because we were about to go and drive this. So the M1A1 Abrams main battle tank in at 65 tons. So we were about to go and play with these things. And these are the guys, we broke a few of these in the field, and so the guys would just show up and give us a new one, which always kind of amazed me.
America.
Yeah, well we did a few interesting ones. We actually broke the sprocket ring off the back on one of them, just making a turn, and just shattered it. I'm still not sure how that happened. And one of my other buddies, something happened with the engine compartment. The door, as he went into a ditch, the door swung open on the back, and he actually broke one in half. That was a big major issue because it's choke armor, which is highly classified, and we could see the inside of it. So the MPs were called out. There was a big tent thrown up over this thing, and yeah, it turned into probably the closest thing to an international incident I've ever been involved with. But at the time, it was pretty serious with that sort of stuff. So my buddy who was driving, he got pulled aside by the MPs and was questioned about what he was doing and all this sort of stuff, because it's all going in reports up to wherever it goes up to, where they start fixing this sort of stuff. So it was kind of a crazy one. But yeah, that's some of the cross training we did. This one here is also still Fort Riley. We were getting ready to go out on a patrol there. You can see I volunteered to carry the M60. We're using blank ammunition in this one, and these little red jibby jobbies, whatever you want to call them, on the front there, that's actually not the blank firing attachment. That is a laser sending unit. So on the tops here, you can see in some of these pictures, you got some little black circles there, and down our webbing as well. Those are laser sensors. So the idea is that when you pull the trigger, he goes thump, 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 thump on the gun, and then it sends out pulses, little laser pulses, because the barrel picks up the vibration, and that cues it to send it off. And then if it hits somebody else's laser receivers, and I forget the type of laser, but there was no risk to our eyesight or anything like that. So, but if it hits their little sensors, then they start going beep, 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 and yeah, you know you're dead. And they come over and you're out of the game, whatever it happens to be. So we were about to go out for a helicopter ride in a UH-60 Blackhawk, and then get dropped in. And when we got dropped off for that one, I stepped off and it started beep, 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 beep. And I walked over to the umpire and said, "What does this mean?" He goes, "It means you're dead." And I went, "Oh man, just got off the helicopter." And he goes, "Yeah, I know." Put a key into it, turned it off, and now my whole system's disabled, except the laser sending unit still works. So I'm walking around the battlefield and nobody can shoot me. And just so you know, I'm carrying it with one hand, but I have a strap around my shoulder. There's none of this Rambo stuff where you oh God, no. Those things are heavy. All right, they're about 40 pounds. You're not going to one-hand that, all right, unless you have a strap. All right, so that's where you can get away with it. But later on, there was, I can remember standing there in the tall grass because nobody can shoot me, and thump, 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 thump. This is great, just killing everybody. It was a lot of fun. So mainly because I lived. Yeah, so that was just some of the training stuff we did. And then eventually we moved over to, in 93, late 93, we got word that Germany was closing down. CFB Lahr was going to close down, and Canadian Armed Forces, or Canadian Forces as we know at the time, we were going to be relocating all our heavy armor, all our equipment from Europe was coming back to Canada. Yeah! And every regiment in Canada was going to get a squadron of tanks. Yeah! And we were going to be going to Somalia. Yeah! But not me, because I was in B Squadron. I was going to tanks. Yeah! So we had a good time with that. That being said, I actually had a lot of friends who went. The RCDs did send 2 complete squadrons to Somalia in '93, and you never heard a word about them because they did their jobs exactly as they're supposed to have. All right. Unfortunately, there was other stuff that happened there, but it wasn't involving me because I got to come back and transition from driving an ambulance and a light track to driving, I was actually going to be a driver, I was going to be a loader, but being part of the Leopard 1 crew. All right, so 4 of us inside this: driver, gunner, commander, and loader. All right, and they're not interchangeable. It's another, Ramboism. You can't drive the tank, command it, load it, and gun it from one position. All right, this is where I truly learned what teamwork is. All right, because I have to rely, I was the loader. I can only affect so much of the operations. I'm loading the gun. Beyond that, I have no control over what happens. I gotta trust the gunner, I gotta trust the commander, I gotta trust the driver. They know how to do their jobs, and they're gonna get us where we need to go and to do the stuff we had to. Just like they're trusting me to load that gun as fast as I freaking can so that we can get rounds down range quickly. My gunner for that one is a guy named, in that crew was a guy named Shane Leeson. He used to say that I loaded out of fear. Fear that he was going to come over the gun and kill me. And he's right. He was a hell of a guy. I learned so much from him, but he was a little, he could be a little intimidating. So what does one of these things look like on the inside? Unfortunately, I don't have a shot of the driver's compartment, but this is a kind of a panoramic of the inside of the turret from basically right in the center of the back. And I'll start over on this side here. You can just see this is the gunner's seat down here. There's the back. There's a seat right there. Gunner's controls are all up behind that cage. Cage is there to prevent them from, when the gun recoils, to prevent their shoulder from being in the way of the gun. All right. The breech block on this alone, which is just this piece here, is 126 pounds. The breech itself, plus the block, is about 1,000. And it moves about this far, like that, when the gun fires. So we got to keep the gunner out of the way. The loader has to stay out of the way, but that's a different story. Over on this side here, we can see the crew commander's override control. He basically sits with his feet right about here, his knees right about here, so the gunner's head is right in front of his knees. They're in really tight. The commander's cupola up top there with all his episcopes, and then we've got the main gun here, and there's our breech, the gun basket, and then if you look over to the side here, you can see all these little U-shapes. That's where we stored our 13 rounds in the ready rack, so they were 13 rounds ready to go. And up in front of those, way down here, is where we stored the rest of our 52 rounds. So after 13 rounds, we had to traverse the turret off, or pull back, and then start a mass unload and reload at the same time. It can take up to 10 minutes. So you really have to be good on that one. And that would be the whole loader side. You can see there's the open hatch up on top. The loader's seat up in its folded position whenever we were getting ready to fire. I actually wouldn't put it in that position. It would fold all the way down. So it would be right down almost at the turret floor. But that way it wasn't getting in my way. I didn't have an extra little, I wanted all the room I could have. And that seat in that position is taking up about this much. So that's this much room less that I have to move around with 50 pounds in my arms trying to load the gun. So I wanted as much room as I could.
Sir,
yeah.
Out of curiosity, when the spent cartridge went out, landed in the basket, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Was there sort of, because I know in some tanks that there's a mechanism that closes over it so to prevent any gases or whatever, or did it just?
No, it's the fume extractor on the front kept most of it out. So, but it's a good question, and if you hold on for a sec there,
sorry.
That's all right. I like where you're going with that. This is what they sound like from the outside. That's 45 tons is being moved. Cool, so that's what it looked like on the outside. What does it look like on the inside? It's a Danish crew, by the way. That brownie's got his arms about 50 pounds. They did something wrong there because there shouldn't be that much smoke coming in, but they probably turned the gun upwind so it was all blown right back at him. Could be okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, well it's rolling right through the hatch. And that stuff is really acidic. Like it gets in you can taste it when you're breathing. And it smells like rotten eggs. So,
Steve, what kind of ear protection are they wearing at that time?
virtually none.
Yeah.
Had headsets on, or I'd sometimes wear ear defenders that were not connected to anything else. Because when we did our drills, we weren't talking over the radio. It was these guys doing it over the radio or the intercom. We were yelling everything. So it didn't matter if I didn't have to hear the radio when we were fighting. I just had to have my ears protected somehow. And actually, that's how I ended up with tinnitus. We were on the ranges in '94, and the tank beside me went live without telling anybody. And the end of his barrel was about 10 feet away from my hatch when his first round went downrange. Sucked the bray right off my head, out of the turret, and gone. It felt like you're in a bass drum and somebody going boom, and with that little bit of a thrown in there as well. And I was like, holy crap, that hurt. But crawled out. My bray was up on the front of the turret, grabbed it, stuck it in my pocket, put some ear defenders on, right back to work. And he continued firing. So it was a couple days later, I was noticing my ears are still ringing. They went, have you seen the medics? No, this is normal. No, it's not normal. Normal is silent. Oh well. So at least that gives you a little bit of idea what it was like in there. So leopards in the field. Some of these pictures were taken on my last exercise with the tanks. I was 2-4 Alpha, our Troop Horns tank. That's my Troop Horn Murray Decker. He's a commander, and he's sitting up on the top, talking to somebody in the tank. Probably the gunner. Below the driver's up on the back deck there. That's actually a really good representation of a very well camouflaged tank. So for those of you who build models with tanks and stuff like that, there's a few key things in here. It's difficult to see from this angle, but for instance, the scrim on the barrel doesn't go back any further than the back of the fume extractor. And the reason for that is when the gun fires, there's a space about like that where the barrel collapses back inside the mantlet. If there was camouflage netting there, or scrim as we called it, there was a possibility it could jam the gun in its fully recoil position, and then we're screwed. All right, because when the gun won't recoil, we can't. We're out of the fight. So we made sure stuff like that didn't happen. You see the circle up top there. That's even though it's during daylight hours, and the covers are on, but that's our thermal cameras. That sort of stuff up top. The gunner's sight is open, so the gunner can see. But that's his primary sight. The secondary sight's right there, and it's open as well. So again, for those of you who ever do models, that sort of stuff. These are important things that are in the real world. This is how we set these up so they can actually do their jobs correctly. And that's where we slept at night. We put up a 4-man tent right on the back deck. We traversed the turret off to the side, depending on where we were, either 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And that was it. We throw the back deck, throw that in there. 4 guys that crawl in. I'm not kidding when I tell people that we rolled over as a crew. Because when you laid on your back, your shoulders touched the other guy on either side. So you tended to sleep on your side. And one guy would, get up to go to the washroom or get called out for sentry, and the whole crew would roll over on the other side. As long as it wasn't you going out, you didn't care. You went back to sleep. Because we were on for operations and stuff like that. In the field, typically we were going for about 22 hours a day. So you get about 2 hours of downtime in there somewhere. So it might be an hour of sleep at the beginning of the night, an hour of sleep just before the morning, or it might be an hour or two before the morning. It all depends on what's going on with the operational tempo is. So, but this particular one, we were in what's called a leaguer, which is a great big box formation, roughly about 500-600 meters across in a big open field, and it was party time. Our exercise was over, and we were going to have a little party that night. So everything was set up more in administrative purposes. But that gives you an idea. If you pictured lots of trees around it, that's what would happen in the field as well, right in the forest as well. And it didn't always go well. Here we are, a couple days later. We had I think honestly, probably the worst driver in NATO. And we practiced this for a week, where he had to drive. And he still, when we got to this one T intersection, and my commander said left, he went right, and then he went straight, and he went into a bog. So we buried the tracks completely. We were suctioned in. It actually ended up taking 5 tanks in the armored recovery vehicle with its blade down, winching on the other 5 tanks to get us out. And the whole time he was pulling, our tracks are spinning freely in the mud, just trying to help anything we can do to get out. So the saying is, where bulrushes grow, leopards don't go. Yeah. The funniest part about that is the driver was actually on loan to us from the troop officer, lieutenant, because he was such a bad driver that the warrant officer, my commander, was going to whip him into shape. And not long after this picture was taken and we were pulled out, we got about maybe 200 meters down the road, and he came on the radio, and let me just tell you this, and I won't do it exactly as he said, because I try to keep this PG as possible. But swearing on the radio is really bad form. That's putting it mildly. You don't drop F-bombs, you don't drop S-bombs, nothing like this on the air. So he gets over the radio and he goes, 2-4, this is Alpha, stop, prepare to change drivers, the experiment was an effing failure, out. And we stopped. And, well, actually, he stopped, and the officer did, and we kept going. And he's like, my commander's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Stop." So finally, stopped, and he comes over there and goes, "What should I do?" And I'm like, I look over, and we've got camouflage paint on our face and stuff, and I can look over, I see Murray, his neck is just getting redder and redder. And I'm like, listen, I just came over the intercom, like, get out of the tank now. Just get out now. I'll bring you everything you need later. Just get out. So he got out, and we carried on. So you had a question there.
Yeah, you said earlier they took a bulldozer and 5 other tanks to
Yep.
pull this guy out.
Yep.
How many tons is this guy?
That's 45.
45 tons.
45 tons. But the problem is, when you go into a bog like that, it creates suction underneath. And the force to break the suction can be up to 10 times of what it actually is required to move the vehicle. So it was nuts. We were, there was a lot of other tanks pulled up beside that, and a lot of them all had signs up with 9.5. We're driving out going, oh god, it's a little embarrassing.
That's a great diorama.
Little embarrassing. Now in 1994, we were actually supposed to go to Cyprus as part of the UN peacekeeping operations in Cyprus, and at that time the Balkans were ramping up. They were in their second full year of their civil war, and the United Nations had pledged to go in there as peacekeepers to try and settle everything down. I won't mince words about this stuff. There was no peace to keep. When we got there, we were witnesses to a civil war that went on for years. And stuff that we got to unfortunately witness, for a lot of it is the stuff of nightmares. Right? And I don't wish that on anybody, but it does happen to a lot of guys I know. All that being said, 90 to 95% of my time in Bosnia was fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, there's not many other jobs around. We used to laugh about, not many other jobs where you can carry a weapon and live ammunition with you, just for, because that's what you're doing. And nobody's there to mess with you. So we had a pretty good time with that sort of stuff. Now, we did a lot of, the fun stuff really was stuff that happened amongst ourselves. A few situations we witnessed. We'll share a couple of them with you as we go on. But so 94, we left in October 94, just after actually it was Thanksgiving weekend. It was when I flew out. And we ended up, but before we had to do it, we had to get all our training out of the way. So unfortunately for me, and my beloved tanks, B Squadron was re-rolled as infantry. That like tracks in for a kick in the butt. So we had to go and do everything that the infantry does, except for them it takes 6 months, and we had 6 weeks to get up to their speed. Luckily, I'd say about a third of those were reservists with us, up to help augment us. The rest of us were all professionals, so it's kind of like taking off one set of shoes and putting on another set. You just do things a little bit differently. It worked out all right, but we had a lot of fun doing it. Probably the best was for a large portion of that exercise. We were on a no live fire because of the fire warnings in the Petawawa area. We were at the risk of setting off forest fires especially if we used ammunition with tracer rounds. So they made us take all the tracer rounds out of all our ammunition and rebelt it all. So now it was all just ball ammunition. Well, you can't see ball ammunition; it just disappears. That was fine. Right at the end, they had a great big rainstorm that came through, so the fire warning level went down. And that happened just before our last defensive live fire confirmation exercise, where the engineers came in and dug trenches for us, and we had to simulate defending against an attack. Except now we had nothing but tracer fire. You're not supposed to fire tracers through a rifle. We did it anyways. Because we had boxes and boxes of this tracer ammunition now. So we would set up usually three to a trench. 2 guys firing, and 1 guy just sat at the bottom, and his whole job was just load magazines and we get belts ready to go and stuff like that. So we sat there, and this happened at night. It comes down, the light finally gets down low enough, and over the radios, blah, 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 and you get the finally get that word, we're all ready there, we're all cocked, ready to go, and you get the, kind of B Squadron, fire! Everybody's just firing off full out. We don't care anymore. Full automatic, which is you never do with a rifle anyways, because we refer to it as spray and pray. You walk in a room, the first 2 rounds may have gone somewhere where you think they should go, but the rest of them have just gone everywhere. So you're praying that they're going to hit something. So we didn't care at this point. We're just steadying rifles against the ground and pulling the trigger, and there, about 2 or 3 seconds, there's 30 rounds gone. Time for a new magazine. And somebody in there found an old armored personnel carrier about 200 meters out, and they started shooting at it. Well, as soon as the first couple rounds hit it and we got some ricochets, now it's a sport. 160 guys are now, instead of going in a nice big, where we're all in parallel lines, we're all focused on this armored personnel carrier. And all you can hear is pew, 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 freaking ricochets everywhere. They come up, all right, ceasefire. You will not engage the armored personnel carrier, hard target, 200 meters to your front. Carry on. All right back. Now that anybody who didn't know about it now knows about it, and we're all getting, so they eventually called ceasefire, and that wrote us off for that. But we had a lot of fun doing it. They also did some good stuff, and it came in handy later on, much later on. We referred to as crack thumb training. So we go out into a valley, and they would fire weapons over our head, live ammunition. Usually about 20, 30 meters above us. So, but they start off with a pistol, and they move up to a rifle, and they move up to the 7.62 millimeter machine guns, and then the 50 cal. And then we get into that's actually a grizzly in the background. You can see the small turret up there. Believe it or not, 8 people will fit in one of those things. I'll show you a picture later. And then they lob artillery at us. And now we understood what artillery sounded like to be when you're on the receiving end of it. And they call it crack thump training because the first thing you hear is the crack of the round going by your head. Then a couple seconds later, depending on how far away it is, you hear a thump. Well, that's the sound of the bullet being fired. The one that just passed your head, you're now hearing the sound of it being fired after it's passed your head. So later on, much later when I was in Bosnia, immensely, we knew exactly what was shooting at us. Thump, 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 or crack, 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 thump, thump, thump. Oh, it was a 50 cal. Yeah, he's coming from over there. Sheesh, that was close. Stuff like that. Unfortunately, it comes every day. So what else we doing that one? This was our actual portrait, I guess, or squadron portrait, getting ready to go to Bosnia. I'm third row up, third from the left, I think, on that particular one. Sadly, I'd say probably about 15 guys out of this. There's almost 200 there. Probably about 15 of them are no longer with us. Unfortunately, most of them have taken their own lives. The stuff that we didn't realize we were getting into, that nobody realized we were getting into, and it comes back, unfortunately, to haunt these guys. Well, haunts all of us. So, we got to drive lots of interesting vehicles, or I got to see lots of interesting vehicles. We started off because one of the squadrons, A squadron, was driving the Cougars. That's the one I started off in. What else do we have there? There's another Cougar. This is the that was, what we call it, Charlie Sierra 1. So Canada Sierra 1. Charlie Bravo 1, because we were overlooking the city down below us. It's called Breza. And that was our job, was to watch over top of Breza. On this side of the valley, it's all Serb side, and on this side, it's all Bosniaks, or the Muslim side. And they didn't like each other. So they were trading rounds a lot. This is where we got, one night I personally was engaged by 50 caliber in the middle of the night because they didn't like us shining lights around to see if we could see people. So they took offense to that somehow. This is another one, Charlie, I want to say it was Charlie Kilo 2. This is the state of the roads in a lot of the places we had to go. This particular one, they actually had fully tracked armored personnel carrier to help people, or help them get up the hill, because the roads were in such terrible condition. Matter of fact, the one time I went up there in an Iltis Jeep. There you go. Not even in granny gear. I was with the diff locks on, but I made it all up there. Like, how the hell did you get up here? Drove. It's a tracked vehicle only. Really? No, I didn't know that. Well, we drove anyways. Where'd you drive it? Iltis. So this particular, I don't think the other one shows it, but this particular checkpoint, that particular one, I was overlooking the air approach corridor to Sarajevo Airport. This was Charlie Delta 1, or we just referred to it Delta 1. It was a checkpoint right on the side of the road. So we'd actually have cars, I'd be, in the checkpoint here, there'd be cars going by right in front of the table at 80 kilometers an hour. It was a curve in the road. So they'd make the curve or they were going to hit us. This was probably the site of one of the funniest stories that ever happened. We had one guy show up about 11:30 at night. Most of us in our section were in the section house. You can kind of see it off to the right here. And we're playing board games or watching a movie or something. And all of a sudden, the little growler phone starts up, the Angry 39 phone. And it's like the one that Radar O'Reilly used in MASH, sort of deal. Well, it comes on, because there's a guy up in this checkpoint there, and he comes over and he goes, "There's a guy right here, oh my God, what he's gonna do?" And holy crap, Marcel's in trouble. So we're all running out of the building. We're grabbing helmets, flak vests, rifles as we're going on, all off their pegs on the wall. And we're all fanning out to pre-positioned fire positions where we're expecting an attack. So we're all running out there, cocking weapons, getting ready to go. And it's a guy in a Yugo. All right, picture like a Chevy Chevette, except crappier. And he's parked it about right here. And he all of a sudden throws it reverse and smash backs it into the checkpoint. That thing weighs about 25 tons of sand and metal and wood. It ain't going anywhere, especially not when a Yugo hits it. He did this about 5 or 6 times, and all he successfully did was move his trunk into his back seat. And by this point, and this has been going on for 5 minutes, by this point we're all like, safe, sling the weapon, take the helmet off. All right, what's this clown going to do next? And finally, he flips us the bird, and F you Canada, and drives off down the road. And about 500 meters down the road, there's a Serb and Bosniak checkpoint, sorry, Croatian Bosniak checkpoint. And we're now all standing out in the middle of the road, and we're kind of watching what's going on. And one of the guys leans into one side of the car, and you see him reach in, he turns off the car, and he comes out. And the other guy's at the driver's side, reaches in through the driver's side window and pulled the guy out bodily, dropped him on the ground, and proceeded to kick the snot out of him. And the other guy came around and joined in. And then they pick him up by the shoulders and the arms, and they drag him over to the ditch and toss him into the ditch. And the other guy gets in and puts the car in neutral and turns the wheel, and they push it into the other ditch. And they sling their AK-47s, and they walk down, and they come up, and we're all standing going. He goes, "Sorry, Canada, he drunk." Like, never would have known he was drunk. But yeah, it was just. But you know, that was 11:30 at night. We didn't go to bed till about 4 in the morning because we're so hyped up on adrenaline now, because we didn't know what we were getting into. It was just one of those. And then we sat there going, "Did we really?" We had questioned ourselves. Did we really see that? No. Yeah. No. Yeah. No, like I went on like that. So that was just one of the places we were at. This is actually right beside it. So this wasn't our section house, but you can see this gives you a general idea. The Constantino wire going across there, that was set up by us to try to keep people out of our general area. It's going to trip them up and cut them up pretty badly if they get in there. But you can see the houses. This would be a typical house. This one's actually lucky because it still has a roof. This is the one beside it. It's all been blown out. And this is what most of the country looked like when we were there. This is actually back in a town called Visoko. We're getting ready to go out on this is when we first got there. That's my friend Rod Newell, and that's a full magazine of live ammunition tucked into his vest, and his rifle. He's getting ready to go out and do a roving patrol all night, looking for. One of our biggest problems, we had guys, we called them dumpster divers, and they'd be anybody from a 12-year-old kid to 40-year-old or 50-year-old people who were sneaking into our camp at night and going into our dumpsters looking for food, because we were throwing away so much food because we couldn't eat it. We actually just couldn't eat it all. It was a little sad, but highly, highly dangerous. If you think about they're breaking into a camp that's full of about 1,000 armed people, and we're not in a happy mood when they break into our camp. So it led to a few high tensions every now and then. I remember I was telling you the back of the vehicle, the Grizzlies there. Well, I'm the guy on the right. My fire team partner is the guy Marshall Heap on the left. And we're the first two into the vehicle because we're the last two out. And there's going to be three more guys behind us going in on that. So when you get in there, I actually didn't sit that way. When I got a little bit forward, I had to rotate and turn, so I'm now facing back into the vehicle and push my shoulder up against the engine panel and put my helmet on, and I could wedge it back and I could fall asleep in the vehicle that way. Because you can't see anything, it's pitch black in there when the doors are closed. Because we have little windows to look through, but there's not much. They're bulletproof glass, they don't let show much. There was one of our typical vehicles, the M113, that's an A2. He's loaded up with a 50 caliber on top, two 7.62s on the sides. And the funniest thing is, they quite often use vehicles like that. The Serbs, the Bosniaks, and the Croats would use it for target practice. Because it's big, it's white, and they know we're not allowed to shoot back. So, yeah, happened pretty much every day. The guys who went to Afghanistan, and it's not we're not measuring anything here in terms of the danger level, but it gives you a little bit of an idea. In Afghanistan, they were encountering attacks on NATO troops maybe 2 or 3 times a day, sort of stuff. And they could be IEDs, it could be a sniper, it could be a full-on battle. It all depended, but that was kind of what their tempo was. For us on our tour there was on an average 180 violations of the ceasefire per day in our area of operations alone. And about half of those violations were aimed at us because they just didn't like the UN. So they'd rather stay there and fight it out themselves. There's a good one, the Grizzlies. That was our parking area at night, the winter time. Getting close to night because the lights are on. At one point, actually, when I was home on UN leave, because we got home for about 3 weeks, a French fighter pilot logged about 10 rockets that landed just the other side of that fence. There was a major whoopsie where he hit the master arm in the cockpit when he shouldn't have, and he went live when they were just doing practice runs. And yeah, so I was at home and I saw it. I made the CBC and I kind of went, it wasn't me. Woohoo! So, and I'm glad that it shouldn't have hit where it had, or shouldn't have happened at all, but at least where it hit, nobody got injured, because 10 meters to this side, and that pilot probably would have killed about 30 Canadians, because they were all standing on top of their vehicles doing maintenance, stuff like that. So it would have been nasty. And speaking of nasty, I think this one has it here. This was the main building we lived in while I was there. It's called the Big Four. It is still there. It's a massive warehouse. We had tents set up inside it to keep the dust and stuff off it. You see lines and lines of vehicles, sea containers everywhere. And one night the Serbs decided to get a little bit nasty with us, and they lobbed 622mm rockets at us. This is the building immediately beside the Big Four. When one of the rockets came down and landed, you can see where it went right through the top of the building. It hit the solid concrete beside it, concrete sidewalk, and it created a splash in the concrete that was a foot deep and 5 feet across. And it blew in every window in our building. It was a miracle nobody was killed or even injured. Came close. One guy was just gotten out of his bed when a piece of shrapnel came in and took out his pillow. But luckily, we got away with that with nobody being hurt. There's a few funny stories that go along with that. We had one of those old air raid sirens, and they crank them like that, and it was everybody wanted to be the guy who cranked the air raid siren. And when this happened, it was the first attempt, the first actual reason to do it. And I came out of the tent. I was probably about the 10th person out of the tent. We're not running because we're not panicking, but we're moving smartly. And there's two of my closest friends, and they're standing toe to toe with the air raid siren there, going, I want to crank the air raid siren. Punches the other guy, he takes the shot. No, I want to crank the air raid siren. And this went on. About 10 of us stopped. We're like, holy cow. Boom, boom. Oh, that's pretty cool. Wow. Oh, yeah. You know, and finally the third guy showed up, and he was not completely dressed, which is why I think he won this. And he walked up and he was just in his underwear, started cranking. We're like, okay, you win. Go put some clothes on before you go to the bunker, but you win. We all kind of filed off at that point. But this is the sort of stuff that you see, the damage they were doing or aiming to do to us every day when we were there. Eventually we moved over to this place. This is actually former Olympic hotel in the town of Kislyak. Kislyak was owned by the Croatians, and it was run by the Croatian mob, so nobody messed with Kislyak. All right, the town was almost in pre-war condition when we got there. Except for this, the elevator didn't work, so we had to walk up 14 flights of stairs to get to the top. My room was here. I had to enter the building here. Yeah, it was, and you're carrying usually about 140 pounds a kid on your back, walking up all the stairs. It was a pain. But it did have some advantages. We had a hello landing zone right beside us, where there was usually a French Gazelle, a French Super Puma like that one, and quite often a British Sea King helicopter in the station there. And you can see these are a little bit empty right now, but this is their fuel bladders off to the side for all their JP7. I think it was JP7 they were using. We used to get pictures like this all the time of them taking off right in front of us. The funniest part was, at least for the Sea Kings, it didn't have to happen with the Pumas for some reason, but the Sea Kings, whenever they took off, they had to go right over top with some high tension wires. And they would get close enough that the electricity would jump from the high tension wires to the aircraft, and quite often would fire off all their defensive flares. So all the flares would go off, to protect it from surface-to-air missiles as this thing's climbing out of a friendly base. And they'd all land on the fuel bladder. And so you'd see about a dozen British, because we were working with the British at this point, but a dozen British airmen running out there with fire extinguishers trying to put out white phosphorus, which just is not going to happen. Luckily it never did blow. So, but hey, how much of that was luck and how much was skill? A little from column A, a little from column B. We'll see where it goes. So we did get a few other good things. We got to play around a little bit. This is me one night. I just decided I was going to see how incredibly cool I could make myself look. Yeah, not really. I have my night vision goggles on, and just trying to, you know, again, I was about 23 years old, trying to be kind of cool. We did a lot of this. This was about day 4 of a Monopoly game. I'm pretty sure we had some multi-international conglomerates going on here at this point. There was some pretty high dealing wheeling. I'm pretty sure we nicknamed my friend Robin there. He just nicknamed Trump at the time, as he was doing it. And Trump, you know, that's where he made his money. So primarily, and Robin was wheeling and dealing with the best of them. So the guy on the far left, obviously the left front, the guy beyond that is Keith Whale, my section commander, and Ken McDonnell, who was our driver. And then every now and then you try to look cool. This is me taking a selfie when selfies were really selfies. You know, you had to set the timer on your camera and set it down and then run back and hope that you got in the picture somewhere. So I got one of me sitting on top of our turret there. We got covers. These are just cardboard tubes that have been painted black, and they're just weather covers to keep the any rain or snow off the barrels of the machine guns, so they don't rust out on us. A little less maintenance to do. And this is my entire platoon as we're getting ready to tear down checkpoint Delta 1, the one I showed you earlier. We had to clean it all up at the end. For some reason, we were pulling away from that position. It was an all hands on deck for that particular day, so we got all of us there. Pretty sure that's me sitting up on the top there. Some of these guys, unfortunately, aren't with us anymore, but most of them, well, I shouldn't say most of them, about half of them, just have lost touch with, even the guys from our meeting we had a couple weeks ago. And then this was us celebrating. We got the last case of beer in the entire hotel. It's a 27-pack. So we're sitting there, it's my friend Brad Bishop on the far side, Byron Conrad, who passed away from cancer 2 years ago, and myself there, sitting in our hotel room, and we were about to go down to the beach. Last night in country, we're flying out the very next day. It's party time. So we had a pretty memorable party on the beach. There was an awesome water slide there that was missing big sections of it. I don't know why. But there'd be a whole section missing, and then the bottom of it was just bare, like the section came down and stopped, and it was bare concrete going out in the ocean. Well, obviously there should have been 2 or 3 more sections, but for some reason they were gone. Somebody asked me about it, you think we use the water slide? I said, no, it's for experts only. He believed me too, which was even funnier. So generally, things that I take back from my entire career, and things that the good memories I hold on to, can be surmised in 2 pictures really. This one right here, which I'm in the, from you guys' perspective in the top right corner, I was the loader for this one. This was actually a picture they were taking for a calendar for our Regimental yearbook that year. And I love this picture because it shows everything that a tank was meant to be. Speed, a little bit of violence, some camouflage, and we look mean as hell. There's nothing politically correct about it. All right, we have one job, and that's to kill people with this thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know it's not necessarily as popular to think about, you know, going out and having to do what the Army has to do and stuff like that. But there's also nothing wrong with every now and then enjoying that. Honestly, it's a godlike feeling. I get to decide at this particular moment what happens. I'm the one who pulls the trigger, or I'm the one who gives the command. And whatever happens, I just know that at that particular moment, I'm the baddest guy in the valley right now. And it's a pretty good feeling, I'll be honest. So there's that picture. And then this one here, which is taken at a gun camp about 3 years later. And I'm on the top left side with the rest of my crew, Pat Desbian, Ian Jeffers, and Pete Olin on the other side. We're sitting around just enjoying life. And these are guys, at our last reunion, I saw Pat Desbian. Pete and Ian couldn't make it. Ian was in Germany, I forget where Pete was. But when I think about my time in the military, this is what I think about the most, the camaraderie. And the things that I miss from that, I miss playing with the big toys, and because it's a lot of fun to go play tanks until you have to do maintenance on them. That sucks. But everything else you get to do with them is a lot of fun, and the guys, because I could walk into and see any of these guys. I haven't seen Ian since I think in 2019. Same time I last saw Des too, before that reunion. And we could walk in and see each other, and the conversation would pick up just where it left off 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, or whatever. And it's like we never stopped. And it is when people talk about brotherhood and stuff like that, this is to me what it really is. I have family, I have a sister, I have parents. These guys are closer than my parents, closer to my sister. They know stuff that Sandra doesn't know yet, I'm sure. So she starts talking to them, then I'm screwed. But,
Hanging in with them.
yeah,
I'll find it.
I know. Anyways, this is the sort of stuff that I remember the most. I remember hanging out with the guys and just feeling like I always have somebody there who's got my back, who's there to look out for me, and then I have the responsibility of looking out for them too. So it's a pretty damn good feeling. And then lastly here, I've got, is this one, and I'm just going to leave this one up. I've got the vehicles that I've driven over the years through the Army. So I'm just going to put this one on a rotation, and we can open this up to questions for you guys. Yes, start in the back, right there.
Yeah. The uniform that you wore in the tank,
Yep.
was it, I'm going to say the word Nomex?
No. So the Canadian government is typically behind the trends by 10 to 20 years. When I got in, our crew suits were made of the same stuff our combat shirts, our combat uniforms were made of, which was cotton and nylon. And somewhere in there they went, oh, it's probably a bad idea because when nylon starts to burn, it melts, and then it melts to your body, and then you can't get the. So eventually they stopped issuing those to us, but we still just wore our general uniforms. And usually when we went to the field, first day you get out, unless you're going out on sentry, you're usually in your set of work coveralls already. So you just take off your shirt, get an undershirt underneath, like an undershirt, your pants, throw a set of coveralls on over top because they're going to get greasy and dirty and yucky. So that's typically what we wore. Unless you were going out to do sentry in that place, in that case, then you went back to your actual uniform and you loaded up with all your webbing and all the other stuff and went out and did that. Does that answer your? I guess they are getting Nomex. When I went to Afghanistan, they started getting them, but it was something I never actually had the opportunity to work with. In the States, we did. When we went to the States, they give us Nomex crew suits. We're like, this is awesome. Why can't we get these? And they had flaps in the bum too, so when you had to go to the washroom, you didn't have to peel the whole thing down. So, which was always, that's probably the biggest reason I know that most guys didn't wear them, because you couldn't go to the washroom. Such a pain. So.
And did it come, well, did the one that you were wearing, did
Yeah.
it have some sort of a hood?
Nope. Nope. The only special thing about that is it had a handle sewn across the back and extra reinforcement under your epaulets. The reasoning being that if you got injured, they could grab you by the uniform and literally pull you out of the vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
What would be your assessment of the Abrams versus the Leopard?
Well, they're pretty evenly matched. They've got the exact same gun. They fire the same ammo. The Leopard is about probably 5 or 6 tons lighter. They've got comparable engines, but the biggest difference is with the Abrams, it's a gas turbine. So when you crank on the throttle, there's about a 3 to 5 second lag before anything starts happening, and then it's a very gradual acceleration. Whereas the Leopard 1s and 2s, it's a multi-fuel diesel engine. You can literally throw almost anything and throw it in burn it. But because it's a diesel engine, it develops instantaneous low torque. So you'll go from your 0 to 60 time is going to be, call it 10 seconds. On an Abrams, it's probably 15 to 20 seconds to get up to the same speed. So I'm not a big fan of the Abrams in terms of their fire control system either. I didn't like when I got to fire them. I didn't like the way they have it set up with the Leopard 1s. When you pulled the trigger, a little blind dropped down in front of you, so you actually lost sight of everything for about a second, and that's to shield your eyes from the blast. So you don't want to become blinded by it, and then we pop up again before the round and make it down. But with the Americans, it didn't do that. It was just a wide open. You could actually see the end of the barrel of your sights. Yeah, close your eyes because you're going to get blinded.
And the gun is identical?
Yep, they're both 120 millimeter Rheinmetall guns produced in Germany. So, because the Abrams was actually the fallout from a failed collaboration between the Germans and the Americans. The MBT-70 was going to be a joint thing, and that was probably around 1970. And then they couldn't come to enough agreements on it, so they went different ways, and they ended up with the Abrams and the Leopard 2.
First, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly, this might sound a simple question, but which other vehicles did you get your wings on?
Did I get my wings on? I got them on a Milcott. That was a pretty good one. And I got them on Iltis's.
Easy. Yeah.
Never got them on any of these guys here. Certainly didn't get it on the HL. That was you didn't want to jump one of those.
Anything close with the tanks?
No, I can't say I ever came close to getting with the tanks. Although I know guys who got it. I know guys who did it, but I can't say that I ever did it. So.
I've also got my wings on an Iltis.
Oh yeah, well, it's not hard to do.
It's not.
One little bump and you're fired in the air.
Yeah.
Our mechanics was like the Iltis because they can climb right into it, basically to fix the engine.
Oh yeah.
There's so much space
much
around.
room. Yeah.
But I want to know who the idiot was who came up with the idea of putting a fuel pump before the fuel filter.
Oh yeah, it's like.
Because it clogs all the time. You know what
Yeah.
the secret for that is, right? Butt end of your hammer. Knock it a few times, it'll knock the dirt loose, and all of a sudden it'll start working again. Get that tick, 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 tick start again.
There you go.
Yeah, something for you. Yes?
Curious, for the APCs and the tanks, what kind of ventilation is there for, like, when you're if in the desert or in the winter? And did you have any Arctic training or anything like that?
I did have some Arctic training. I gotta answer the Arctic training first. I did have some Arctic training. We used to call it, it's called winter warfare. And in Petawawa, it's like the Arctic. There, it gets down to minus 50, and it's freaking cold. And I think we did it once a year. That you go for about a week. I can honestly say, and I'm happy to say so, I avoided every exercise in the Arctic that our men ever put on. Never went. Even if it was just an excuse of, hey, we need you to go up to the. No, sorry, I'm playing hockey. It's regimental team. It's playoffs, and I got regiment before squadron. I got and so they left on the Saturday, and we were out of the playoffs on the Sunday. We spent the next 2 weeks with snowmobiles, and we destroyed 4 or 5 snowmobiles just because we had so much ice. We were jumping them off the ice. There's another thing I got my wings on. Got the snowmobiles. We're jumping the snowmobiles and then smash them to the ground. And after they finally, about a week and a half into the exercise in the Arctic, they called back and said, we need to send two snowmobiles up. We're like, ruh-roh. There aren't 2 snowmobiles left that are running here. So we had to explain that one for a bit. But so yeah, there was Arctic and winter training. With the tanks, we typically didn't take them out that much in the wintertime. For ventilation, whatever the atmospheric conditions are like outside. The only person who stays dry is usually the gunner. So if it was an MBCW situation where like nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, there was a system in there where the idea was you put the first round up the breech, close the breech, you can lock the turret into place with a special gear lock on the side, and then they can inflate a bladder around the outside of the in between the turret and the hull. And the idea, it was twofold for that one. You could either then swing the vehicle or swing a relative turn with a drive on the bottom and come up the other side with getting the water into the turret. And theoretically, it was also airtight. So that was fine. And you closed your hatches, you were sealed. That only lasted as long as until you fired your first round. Because now you have an opening into the vehicle. And in order to fire the first round, you got to unlock the turret and undo the bladder and everything anyway. So. Yeah, it was whatever was outside. When they went to Afghanistan with the Leopard 1s, they were issuing the guys cooling suits, which I don't think worked all that well from what I understand. And the Leopard 2s, when we got those, one of their big selling points is they were air conditioned on the inside. So, now that being said, they weren't winterized. So, all the ones we got, we did send a squadron immediately to Afghanistan. They were Dutch. Yeah, Dutch Leopard 2. But all the ones we got from Germany came to Canada and then spent 4 years being refurbished and having a heater put into them. Because otherwise you're going to freeze your butt off in the winter. It's just like a meat locker inside one of those things.
I mean, it's even cold in Afghanistan too.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, especially when you get up in it's the winter time and so yeah. We didn't tip it, it's not as cold as here, but it's a drier cold, it's kind of like Calgary, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But most of our guys now, I don't recall them ever complaining about the kills there, so. And plus they have tinnies, so.
Yeah.
Once again, back to the ejection
Yep.
point and the lead. When was it, because in the video, you see that the ejection port is being used,
Yeah.
the spent cases are being tossed out during firing.
Yeah,
Is that a normal procedure or no?
not usually, no. That's a gun camp procedure, usually, and the way they were doing it there, my experience with it was that whenever we fired, we'd get 5 to 5 casings in the gun basket, and then you can't have any more because the 6th casing gets laid on top. So at that point, you're pulling it out individually and just sticking it back in the rack. To turn around and stick it and shove it out that ejection port takes too much time. It's easier just to put it back into the racking. When you get to a mass unload, oh yeah, that's where you're tossing shells and the casings out there. That's where my friend Shane Leeson, I thought was going to kill me because I was the loader and he was the gunner, and he was about this tall and he was a fighter. And he came by because there was a bunch of empty casings on the ground that I already put out. And he came by and I didn't see him duck down, and it's about a 20-pound casing empty, and it's sharp. You know, gong off the head, and all I heard was, "You yelling at me." I'm like, oh shit. Pardon my French again. Reach out, grab the ejection, or we call it a pistol port. Grab that, closed it, locked it. The loader's hatch doesn't lock. But I climbed up really quick and grabbed it and pulled it over and cranked it as hard as I could and held onto it and put my feet on the ceiling and pulled for all it was worth so he couldn't get in. And I waited for about 2 minutes hanging there like that until I was pretty sure he was gone. And I just opened the pistol port a little bit. Okay, yeah, oh, okay, Shane's gone, good. And then I climbed out and found him and told him I owed him a 26er or something. So just don't kill me.
So unfortunately, we have to end the questions. I'm sorry, because we've got 15 minutes to go before Toronto Public Library gives me the gears for staying past 2 minutes. All I can say is, I could say thank you. I think it's an understatement to say thank you for your service, really. How much that he's done. And when you see people like Steve walk down the street, don't know he's served, other people who've served, you realize that there's a lot of people out there doing what they do, what they've done to maintain our lifestyle. So thank you again.